Welcome back to GOT. Today we're going to talk about the 200 megapixel camera. Is it just a marketing ploy? Is it a scam? Does it really work? Well, today we are going to pixel peep. So hang on to their hats. Let's go. For the last couple of years, Samsung has really been pushing the 200 megapixel camera as something really special. Matter of fact, they even put it in the last Samsung Z Fold Special just to get that thing sold. And now they're going to be marketing it in their new Samsung Edge. I don't know if it's a 25 Edge or what it is, but the rumor is it's going to only have two cameras, and one of them is going to be the 200 megapixel main. Now, I personally have had the 200 megapixel camera for a couple of years now and really have yet to find a use case for it. And why is it? I believe because it's a lack of quality. Now, what do I mean by lack of quality? You know, it is 200 megapixels, by the way, which is a lot of detail in a photo. And if you're just going to take a 200 megapixel photo and leave it at that, that'd be great. Problem is, using that camera on this, you have to select it separately. It's not something you could just use when you pick up the phone. And when you do, it's a huge file format, and it's very hard to manipulate on a PC these days. It's very difficult to see the difference when they're bending down the 50 megapixel to a 12 megapixel, and then you can force the 50 or force the 200, which are larger files. It's still difficult to tell the difference, and we'll see that here in this video. So what is the real use case scenario of the 200 megapixel? Well, you guys stick around to the end for that. So let's go ahead and do some pixel peeping. And while we do that, I'm not really going to talk a whole lot about quality of the photo, although that we know that is important, but mostly we're going to talk about detail. Does it pick it up? Let's take a look. So where we're going to start here is the Samsung S25 Ultra. We're going to look at the standard photo from the 50 megapixel camera, and this is what you get. You get a really nice photo. You can see here, there's a lot of detail if you don't zoom in, but when you zoom in, and my focus on this video is going to be the sign here in the back. When you zoom in, it doesn't really come into focus. It's pixelated. There's not much there to see. And then when we go and head and move to the next photo, this is actually the 50 megapixel. You can see here by the dimensions, you can see it's a little bit larger. And when you zoom in on it, still, if you look at the sign, you still can't make out the sign. There's not much to see there. And so let's go ahead and move to the 200 megapixel camera, the camera that's going to get all the detail. You can see how large the file size is there. And it's going to really pick this up, right? Not really. You zoom in and look at that. Still, you can barely see it a little bit better, but it's still pixelated. Where's all the detail? Well, the detail's in the full-blown photo, but if you pixel peep and zoom in, there's not much there. Now let's go with the Pixel 9 Pro 50 megapixel, and this is the better camera on the Pixel. And let's go ahead and zoom in, and you look here. Oh, there's a word field or fields. You can see it. So that's pretty nice. I see, go back here to the 200 megapixel Samsung. Look at the difference. You can't even make out the word. You know what it is, so you can picture it in your mind, but nowhere near as clear as what you get on the Pixel 9 Pro. You can actually make out the word. Take a quick second here and thank you for hanging out with me on this video, talking about the 200 megapixel camera. I would really appreciate and thank you if you would smash that like button down below, because it really does help out the channel. Helps me to be able to afford to put out more content like this and more for you. Now that's out of the way, back to the video. Now let's look at the OnePlus Open. The OnePlus Open, we're going to have something similar here on the standard view of the, 48 megapixel camera. You don't get much detail zooming in on it. And the picture seems to be a little more washed out than the others. Now let's go ahead and look at the 48 megapixel camera. And when you zoom in, you still don't see a whole lot at all. So there's not a whole lot of detail in that. I'm not quite sure why, because you have a 48 megapixel main shooter there. Now let's go ahead and move on to the Automatic V3. This is the newest phone I have, and your standard photo, nothing really. It's horrible. The photo is really nice coloring, and even when you go to the 50 megapixel camera, I think it even does a little better on the coloring and everything, but you don't get any image when you zoom in. It's still the same, I don't know, pixelated, unfocused, whatever you want to call it. Not a lot of detail. Now moving on to the 12 megapixel, or to the 10 times zoom on this thing, which is a 50 megapixel zoom, but it does bend it down to 12 megapixel. But you looky there, it came out really nice using the pinch to zoom because it uses a 3.5 camera. So if you were just use the 3.5 camera, this is the image you get, which isn't bad itself. You know, zooming in the photo afterwards is not as good as zooming in while you're actually taking the image here at the 10 megapixel. You get a better image doing it that way. But that's pretty decent using the zoom. So, you know, where's that 200 megapixel camera's advantage? It's just not there. Now, this is a 50 megapixel using the Honor Magic V3. And you can see if you 10 times zoom, it looks really good. See here, I'm on a 10 times zoom. But you notice how the file size isn't all that great. But still, it's a good photo. This is acceptable. So the zoomed in lens does a whole lot better than Samsung's 200 megapixel if you want to look at a close detail of a photo. Now the OnePlus Open 64 megapixel camera does an okay job. When you go in 10 times, it does really nice. You can see it's a very clean photo. I think it's one of the cleanest out of all of them when you zoom in on the cameras. Now look at the Pixel 9 Pro at 50 megapixel, and let's go ahead and do a 10 times zoom on it. You can see here, it looks pretty good, and we'll zoom in on it. That's really clear. And again, that one kind of beats out the rest. And then when you use the standard zoom in on this phone, where it does the pixel bending down to 12 megapixels, it's still pretty good. It's not bad at all. So if you want to take in some zoom shots, you know, you pinch to zoom on these cameras, you could do really good. Now, let's move on to the S25 Ultra and its 10 times camera. Look at this. This is crazy. I don't think it's as good as the other ones using their digital zoom. This one is not a digital zoom. This is a 10 times dedicated camera. And let's do it at 50 megapixel. And it's really not any better. You're not seeing anything different. Now, you would hope that when you went to the 200 megapixel camera, it'd be a lot better than this. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's zoom back out. It's a nice photo. Don't get me wrong. They're all nice photos. But when you get in there and you pixel peep, like this is the 200, for some reason, it does not take it in large format. So I think once you, even though you're on 200 megapixel setting, I think once you zoom in, it defaults back because this is not any better than any of the cameras. So there you have it. The 200 megapixel, is it just a marketing ploy? I think so. The only real good use of that 200 megapixel is if you want to do landscape shots or something like that, or a photo of a still image. As far as doing portrait, it doesn't have a portrait mode. I'm sure you can blur it after the fact, but you can get enough detail out of a portrait from the 50 megapixel camera, which does have portrait mode. So again, that makes me wonder, what is the 200 megapixel camera for? If you have a good use for it, let me know down in the comments. I want to know, why a 200 megapixel camera? I don't understand. I don't see the ploy in the 200 megapixel camera, except a marketing ploy to put it in the Samsung S25 Edge, if that's what they're calling it, or the new upcoming Z Fold 7. Try to get you to buy it because of the 200 megapixel camera, which is not very useful if you use it in the 200 megapixel setting. If you want to see more leaks or rumors or comparisons with the upcoming Z Fold 7, check out this video here. Until next time, God bless.